I'm Charlotte McLeod with investingnews.com, and here today with me is Patrick Yip, Director of Business Development at APMEX. Thank you so much for joining me. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Charlotte.
Really nice to be talking to you. And since it is our first time speaking, I wondered if you could tell me just briefly about how you got into the precious metals industry and the work you do at APMEX.
Yeah, so it was way back. I got my first coin in 1988. It was a gold maple leaf. But I really started getting into precious metals basically in 2008. I had your typical portfolio back then, stocks, bonds. I thought everything was great in the world. And then obviously we had the 2008 financial crisis. I had a financial planner back then. I saw my portfolio get chopped in half and I said, what happened? I started looking into it. Started looking into Austrian economics, looking into precious metals. I really started buying precious metals, like I said, in 2008. 2011, I was working for myself, doing commercial aircraft deals, and I was just browsing around on APMEX.com. I was a retail customer before I joined there. I found their job openings, applied for a position, and got a position there in 2011. And I've so far held various roles at APMEX. I've held roles in sales, merchandising, project management, marketplaces. So this is eBay, Amazon, and Walmart. And now I'm leading the business development team.
Okay, very interesting origin story. I think a lot of people had that 2008 wake-up call. So one of the things I wanted to start by talking about is what kind of demand you're seeing so far this year in terms of physical gold and silver. I'm curious about what products people are buying and also about who is buying.
Yeah, so I would say ever since the pandemic in 2020, we saw demand just jump through the roof. And you could talk to any precious metals retailer, you'll see that their demand essentially doubled. And demand remains high too. And just so you know, around 2020 and on, we've been doing north of $2 billion in sales every single year. And the majority of our customers are retail customers. So these are not wholesale deals. These are people like you and I looking to protect their assets, saying, I need gold, I need silver. They're buying basically a lot of the top products, and we could get into that in a bit. I know you asked about that, but we could get into the whether people are buying gold and silver, top coins, top bars people are buying. I did a presentation on Monday, but yeah, we could get into that if you want.
Yeah, I would love to hear about what people are most interested in buying, and are there things that are hard to get a hold of right now? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so first of all, let me say, so APMEX, we're one of the largest dealers in the U.S., if not the largest dealers. Like I mentioned, $2 billion in sales, $18 billion in lifetime sales. So my thought is our data is likely indicative of the broader precious metals market. So starting about, let's say gold and silver. So right now about 67% of our sales are gold. So a lot of people are getting into gold, and then about 30 or so percent are silver, and then the remaining couple percent are platinum, palladium, and other like non-metal things such as copper. Some people like buying that stuff too, but the majority of the people are buying gold, and I think gold is largely viewed as that like the ultimate safe haven. So we're seeing a lot of gold buying on our end.
Okay, and we got to talk about premiums as well, because that's something that people should be aware of. Maybe sometimes they forget. What are they looking like right now in terms of gold and silver products?
Yeah, so they still are high. And the reason for that, too, is anyone who's been in the precious metal space will remember 2011 and 2012. You had crazy demand. And then 2013 to 2019, you had demand soften. It almost like normalized. It was not as hot as 11 and 12. But what happened is a lot of the mints, a lot of the manufacturing facilities decided to right-size their production. So if you had excess machinery, you had excess staff, well, you're going to right-size that production to get down to levels that you think are sustainable. So what happened is during that time, APMEX bought from, our 50 plus mint relationships. We bought directly. The mints then met our needs. We then sold the products to end users at a small premium. Since the pandemic hit in 2020, what's happened is demand doubled, as we mentioned, and the mints and a lot of the manufacturers were right-sized for that demand from 2019 or 2012 or 2013 up to 2019. So they couldn't meet the demand. So what happens in a lot of these cases, and it's affecting a lot of Silver Eagle premiums the most, but let's say the mints would make up to their production capacity. They then say, hey, I got to make all my partners happy. I'm going to allocate some to you, APMEX, some to this holder, and they just spread it all thin. And then as a dealer like APMEX, we're saying, hey, we can't get everything we need from the mints. So we call our wholesaler friends and say, hey, we need your coins. And they said, okay, well, I'll sell you my coins, but they're not selling their coins at what they bought it at the mints. They're marking it up. So we're essentially having a weighted average premium. Some we're buying direct, some we're buying from wholesalers, and that's causing premiums to go up. And you're especially seeing it on the Silver Eagle side. Just about a month ago, premiums were about $14 over spot on a Silver Eagle. Now they're probably around 10, so they are going down. But premiums are something I think you definitely need to watch out for when buying precious metals.
Are you able to say where you're seeing the best value right now for people who are looking at buying at the moment?
Yeah, I would say on the silver side, I personally like 100-ounce silver bars. I think that gives you kind of the best of both worlds. It's not too large where you lack the liquidity, but premiums are also low too. So you're talking probably about $2 over the spot price for a 100-ounce silver bar. So spots around $25, you're getting $27 silver. So in this 100-ounce silver bar case, about $2,700. Like I mentioned, Silver Eagle premiums are still $10. I probably would stay away from those because the last thing you want to do is let's say you buy silver and you bought a Silver Eagle. Let's say you're right in the next year. Silver went up, but your premiums normalized from that $10 down to the historic average, which is around $4 or $5. And you could lose money in that situation. So I would say you don't want to, you need to be conscious of premiums.
Yeah, and this is the kind of math that I will say I definitely need some help with. So thank you for that. So you've been doing this for quite a while. And one of the things that I'm curious about is if you've seen a change in the profile of buyers of physical precious metals. And I'm thinking specifically in the context, you started to mention COVID. We've seen even this year, the banking crisis. Are you seeing over the time you've been in the business, more people or different people?
Yeah, I would say that there has definitely been a shift, and one of the most notable changes was during the silver squeeze movement. So you had the whole Wall Street bets squeezing some of these stocks, and then you had the whole silver squeeze movement in early 2021, and I think that brought a lot of visibility to silver. So what's interesting is our mix is it started around 20% silver, let's say 70% gold. It jumped up to north of 40% silver during that silver squeeze time. We saw a lot of new buyers get in there. Obviously, the silver squeeze didn't materialize as a lot of people hoped, and then they had silver squeeze part two, I think in probably early 2021, and it caused just basically a lot of new investors. So these people looking to essentially make a quick buck. But we are seeing a lot of the new silver investors. We are seeing a lot of people just having fear these days now too. I spoke with a guy earlier, and he's trying to protect his retirement savings. He has over $1 million, and right now he's just saying, where do I put this money? He's like, I don't trust the dollar. I think that the U.S. government's just printing away. Where do I store it? And so he's looking for a solution where he can get precious metals, gold, silver. Basically, just he's looking to protect his assets.
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of people are feeling that way, and for good reason. One of the reasons I asked that question about the changing profile is because I know at APMEX, one of the things that you are trying to do is make precious metals more accessible to more people. So if we could also talk about some of the different ways that people can buy if you don't want to necessarily just buy your gold and silver and keep it in your house.
And that's a great question. And we like to offer a solution for all types of investors. On one end, you have the people who say, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. Great, we support you. We have over 30,000 products of gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Whatever you want, we likely have it. We like to call ourselves like the Amazon of precious metals. On the other side, you have the people who get gold and they hold it in their hand and they're like, what do I do with this? Do I hide it? Do I bury it? Like, what do I do with this? And as we mentioned, there's a lot more new precious metals buyers coming in, and a lot of people are used to this digital world where like everything's on their phone, on their desktop. They're not used to holding tangible assets too. So back in 2018, we partnered with Sprout Asset Management to come up with One Gold, and Rick Rule was actually involved in the original design of this company. He came out to our offices in Oklahoma City. We know him well too, but we created One Gold, and what One Gold is, it's taking a lot of these modern investment platforms. So like you think of like a Coinbase, a Robinhood, like one of these very intuitive platforms where everything's on your mobile app. So we said, let's take that model and bring it to the gold space. But what One Gold is, it's an online investment platform where you can get gold, silver, and platinum stored at your choice of vaults around the world. So we have a US location, a Canada location, a UK, and a Switzerland location. But what we do at One Gold is we have agreements with various vaulting companies. So Brinks, Loomis, and Royal Canadian Mint in Canada. We then buy wholesale bars. So these are 1,000-ounce bars of silver, 400-ounce bars of gold. We purchase it, we store it in the vaults, allocate it and segregate it, and then we make it available for customers to buy. So they could buy in 0.001 ounce increments. And the nice part about it is we spoke about premiums earlier, and premiums are affecting different products in different times too. So the premiums on the wholesale bars, so 1,000-ounce silver bars and 400-ounce gold bars, are not as high as what they are on the retail side. So we're buying silver at 30 cents over spot from a lot of these wholesalers. We then sell it for 2% over spot, so 50 cents over spot. We're making 20 cents an ounce. But it's a volume game. We've done over $1 billion in transactions on one gold. So we're getting a lot of people in there. We've done transactions in euros, British pounds, Canadian dollars, euros, British pounds, Canadian dollars, and US dollars too. We have customers across 137 different countries, over 500 plus thousand downloads on the mobile app. But it's a great way to get access to precious metals and have direct title and ownership of it without actually, worrying about where to store it.
Yeah, and I like that you offer all these different options because then you avoid kind of the polarizing discussions like you're talking about between you have to own it or it's fine to do this. Makes a lot of sense. I think we should also talk about why it is a good idea to own gold right now. So what I'm curious about is what you see as the main drivers of gold at the moment, because there's so many things going on out there.
Yeah, there definitely are a lot of things. I think just looking at the past couple of years, you look, and this is speaking of the U.S., obviously we're U.S. based, but you look at the U.S. money supply, and this is M2, so this is basically currency in circulation plus savings accounts. But you're looking at that, and that increased by 35% in the past couple of years. Obviously, the U.S. economy did not grow by 35%, so that's debasing the currency. You said, is it going to continue? Well, I think the U.S. government has a couple options. I mean, one is they could balance the budget, which is probably not going to happen. I don't think any government's going to do that. Two, they can default on the debt, which they're probably not going to do either because that's going to cause mass riots across society. Or three, they can inflate. So they're going to inflate. And then another thing, too, is you look at central bank gold demand, too. Central banks are scooping up gold in masses. So 2022 was the 13th consecutive year of people buying gold, or central banks buying gold. And in addition, 2022 marked a 50-plus year high in the amount of gold that they're buying. And I think these central banks are just doing what's in their best interest. You look, and even with the whole Russia and Ukraine thing, the U.S. took Russia off of SWIFT. The dollar is supposed to be the world reserve currency. It's supposed to be unbiased, but it's clearly biased. So if you're one of these developing countries, you're going to say, I'm going to do what's in my best interest. They're buying gold. Another thing, Rick Rule said it many times too, is gold is underowned. Our stat is a little different than his, but ours is obviously we're the largest precious metals dealer. We've had over 2 million customers, 2 million customers register their email address. Not all the 2 million customers have purchased, but if you look at the 2 million compared to the U.S. population of north of 300 million, it's a small percentage that have even expressed an interest. And like I said, these 2 million have not bought. These are just 2 million who express an interest. So I think gold is still vastly underowned.
Okay, I like the twist on the Rick Rule stat because that's one that I've heard a number of times. So I don't know if you look at prices, but I'm sure you have ideas on what range of prices for gold we could see this year. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I used to do some charting back then, and I used to do some trading. I'm not going to give any investment advice, but what I've noticed a lot when I traded is usually you have a support or resistance line, and the fourth test of that support or resistance, it usually breaks. So you had that like 2070 level that gold's tagged at 3 times right now. It's currently pulling back. I think the next time it's going to tag it, I think it's going to break through and I think it's going to run. And the question is, how high will it run? Well, I guess how low will the dollar go is the question.
Right. And, what do you think it would take to spark some of these buyers that are on the sidelines to come in? Is it that 2000 number? Is it something else?
I think what's funny about our industry is we see a lot of buyers probably buy not at the best time too. I personally think now is a good time to buy because I think that it's going to break above that 2070 level. But the initial spike above 2000, I forget what exact year it was, we saw everyone run into precious metals. And then you saw this, people saying, hey, it's breaking out to a new all-time high. You saw premiums go up during that time, just demand just flooded in. And obviously, if you're buying above 2000, you were wrong at this point because it's below then. But I think, long term, it's going to be a great investment. I think it's, like we said, how low is the dollar going to go? I think it's going to break up. I would not be surprised if I saw, let's say 10, maybe 20% move above that level as soon as it breaks out. I think it's going to be a pretty strong breakout.
All right. And I want to touch on silver as well. And it often gets grouped in with gold because it has some of the same drivers, but silver has its whole industrial side as well, which is quite interesting. So thoughts on silver in 2023?
Yeah, one of the things I like looking at it is just the gold silver ratio too. And that's the price of gold divided by the price of silver. I looked at the past 100 years, and there's people who say, hey, it's going to go down to 16. I don't know if that's going to happen, but in the past 100 years, it's basically been about range bound. It's been as low as, let's say, 20 or so on the bottom end. It's been as high as north of 100. I just think you look at it, it's around 80 right now. It's towards the top end of that range, which hints that silver may be undervalued compared to gold. And then another thing we did is we researched what typically happens in gold bull markets and silver bull markets. What we notice is silver tends to run after gold, and then to a greater extent. So, if you're looking at silver, maybe look for the next gold bull run when gold breaks above that $2,100 level. If you think you missed the boat, get into silver, and if history repeats, maybe it just shoots up in a greater percentage than gold.
Right. And do you have any thoughts on how people might want to arrange their precious metals portfolio in terms of allocating to the different metals?
Yeah, I did an analysis too, just looking at the past 50 years of data, just looking at what the optimal holdings of precious metals is, and it comes out to about 20%. And precious metals basically it's a negatively correlated asset to the S&P, and we looked at 10-year average return. So this is not just like any given return. So I'm not going to penalize the S&P in 2008 because it's usually what happens after a big drawdown is the next year it rebounds for part of that, but basically, you could get, according to our analysis, you could get almost a return of 100% stock portfolio. I think the stock portfolio did a 7% annual real return. This is inflation adjusted. That 80% portfolio of S&P and 20% of gold had like a 6.7% return. But what's interesting is that gold S&P portfolio had a 2.7% standard deviation, which was lower than the bonds 100% bond portfolio standard deviation. So I think 20% is probably a good number. I know Jeff Christian did a similar analysis. I think he's saying somewhere around that number too as well.
And then if you break it between the different precious metals, how would you possibly allocate that?
So silver is a little more volatile. I did also analysis on silver too. It doesn't quite have the same outcome too, because what happens with gold is as you start allocating to gold, what you'll see is, like, let's say you had that 100% S&P portfolio. Now you did 95% S&P, 5% gold. What you'll see is the return goes up and the volatility goes down. And it keeps on going, and it hits this point when at the 20% where you basically have the highest return, lowest volatility. Silver, I noticed what happens is as you add silver into it, your volatility goes up and your return goes up. So it depends really on the type of investor. There is not an ideal. The math didn't quite work out the same, but it's like if you're okay with higher volatility, higher risk, or higher returns, then you could allocate towards silver.
Yeah, I think, there's always a trade-off, so you have to decide what you want that to be. I just want to touch really briefly on storage and storing your precious metals. Obviously, you can have a company store them for you. Some people do like to keep them close to them, and I want to touch on this because you made some interesting comments before we turned the camera on.
Sure.
So, how do you decide what you're comfortable with having?
Yeah, everyone I've talked to about precious metals, let's say you're a new precious metals investor, you put a couple $1,000s into it, and then you say, hey, maybe I want more precious metals, then it becomes tens of thousands. And then at some point, maybe it becomes hundreds of thousands, or maybe it becomes millions. We have a customer who purchased north of $60 million from us, and he stores in his house. I think he has a vault. I've not seen it, but he's comfortable with storing that amount of metal in his house. I personally think you just gotta diversify. Like I like physical precious metals. I think everyone needs to own physical precious metals, but let's say you had $1 million in gold in your house. Well, guess what? You're not at your house. You're here at the conference. Do you feel comfortable with that? If so, great. That's up to you. But I think you need to diversify too. If you start getting at that point when you're not comfortable, we offer a couple different solutions. One is Citadel. It's a global depository where your metals are held at Brinks, fully audited, fully insured, allocated, segregated. They're your metals collecting dust on a shelf. If you want them, you can ship them back to you. And then the nice part about Citadel is, let's say you said, hey, I want to liquidate my metal. You could just call us. We'll liquidate it. We'll send you a wire or a check that same day because we know what you have at Citadel. That's one option. And then One Gold's another option too. As we mentioned too, allocated, segregated, stored solution. But I think you just need to figure out what you're comfortable with. If you want all the physical in your house, great. But I think you need to diversify at some point.
Okay, that makes total sense. And I think we're coming toward the end here. I want to ask if there's any final advice you would leave investors with as we're heading into the rest of the year.
Yeah, I personally think that now is a great time to buy. Maybe gold goes down a little bit more from here. I don't know. Time will tell. But historically, the seasonal strong period of precious metals is approaching in the fall. So We always have that summer lull. We've seen it at APMEX a lot of times. In fact, our forecast that we do, when we do our sales, we forecast a slower summer period. I think that's what we're in. I think it's going to break above that $2,100 level. I think it's going to run. I think it's probably the best way you can protect your assets, and personally what I'm doing.
Okay, well, this is a perfect way to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about gold and silver, precious metals.
Great. Thanks again for having me on.
Oh, of course. And once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with investingnews.com, and this is Patrick Yip with APMEX. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a comment below. We'll see you next time.